the reason I say anything before we meditate is to benefit the experience of meditation in some way. If we start thinking too much, we're kind of going against what meditation is all about. And it's not that meditation is about not thinking or trying to stop the thinking. It's more about accepting the thinking, accepting thoughts, and resting in that acceptance, and giving ourselves permission to really let go of the past and the future. Just let things be as they are. No desire to change things or anything like that. So one of the big in just about every tradition, a spiritual tradition that is, they talk about suffering and the opposite of suffering, which is happiness, or I like to think that it's more of a peace of mind than a happiness that we can search for and try to find out there. That peace of mind can come from many things, and a lot of it is just being able to settle into what the circumstances offer at the time. And so a lot of the reasons that we suffer is because of what I consider attitudinal. I don't know, is that a word? I have to ask my dictionary. Is attitudinal a word? I like attitudinal.
Attitudinal, I think.
Attitudinal.
Yeah.
Attitudinal.
Yeah.
Attitudinal suffering. And so it's a little bit different than the suffering that we might think in terms of what suffering is, as far as somebody says something to us and we get upset, or we fail at something, we're not performing well at work, or we forget our sister's birthday and we get upset about ourselves and our activities and that kind of thing. But those kind of things are kind of circumstantial, but the real suffering that happens to us is based on our attitude about it, and that attitude has to have something to do with our personal story. When we attach our personal story to something, it seems to hurt, it seems to bother us, and it takes away that peace of mind that is really a trademark of who we are at the deepest level. And so basically, it's our attitude about suffering. So nothing out there has to change for us to be free from this suffering that we usually refer to. But it's our attitude that comes from within us, and how we deal with certain things. For example, if somebody would say something negative to us, and if several things could happen, we could maybe we think that person is talking to somebody else. I kind of turn around and like, oh, whatever, and we just walk on. Or in my case, I wear hearing aids, and if the batteries go out, I don't hear so well. So if somebody says something horrible to me, they have to speak up, otherwise I'm not going to hear it. So I'll just kind of, smile and go, yeah, right, that's fine. But if somebody hears it and takes it personally, it's like, and it kind of triggers something. It's all about those triggers. All of a sudden it triggers a story or something that conjures up something from the past. Then it really seems to hit home for us. And the way we can, and I don't want anybody to take my word for anything, anything that I say. I want you to check it out for yourselves. And the way we can do that is that when we are suffering, we actually ask ourselves, how did this come about? And what is my personal story behind this? And is it actually that thing that happened? Or there's something more to it, something more connected to it? And we'll usually find that there's more to it. One of the practices we can do, whether we're meditating or just in everyday circumstances, is actually, it's kind of like a a positive trigger. We just put our, I have to watch for my microphone here, but we put our hand on our heart and ask ourselves, why am I suffering this way? Why is this happening? And we will almost always find that there's a story or this attitudinal type of suffering behind it. Not the circumstance itself, not the thing that that person said or the thing that we said or the thing that happened or the experience or anything. There's more to it than that. And then once we dig into that, and usually it doesn't take much digging, and once we see that, it does relieve a lot of suffering for us. And it kind of takes us back, brings us back home, And we can notice that in meditation too. When we become quiet, close our eyes, the thoughts start slowing down, and maybe something will come up, an experience that we had. And usually we'll find that in meditation, these things are much, much softer because we're more aware of the underlying story behind it. And if not, if it's something that comes up again, habitual, we should take a look at that attitudinal suffering behind it, that story behind the suffering. And so, these kinds of things and many other things really make meditation a wonderful gift for us. It's a wonderful tool for us to use to discover more about ourselves. Again and again and again, like every moment is a lesson. I think somebody said that last night, didn't they?
I didn't.
You didn't say it, no, it's not. Somebody did. I thought they said every moment is a lesson, and it's true. Every moment is a lesson. Yeah. Last night we had direct pointing, which everybody is welcome to join us.
I'm sorry, what do you guys do on Tuesdays?
Direct pointing is it's called direct pointing because it's directly pointing to our true nature. We kind of take subjects like similar to what I just mentioned, and we expound on it. We share it more.
Is that every other Tuesday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want, I'll put you on the list. There's a list that I send out to people. Anybody here, if you want to be on that direct pointing list, just let me know and I'll put you on the list. And then you'll get an email every other week just as a reminder. Because if you're like me, if it comes up every other week, it's like, it's hard, hard to remember these things.
Is that 7?
Yep, 7 o'clock. Unless you're in Terry's ladies group.
Correct. Then you may not go
She
to
just-
direct pointing.
she just told me-
I just made sure Prita
Yeah,
understood
she just told
that.
me you're not allowed to go to do it pointing.
Right, we don't
Like,
want any
I'm too
conflict.
scared of her, I won't go.
Where is big ladies group?
I'm sorry?
The women group?
My group is in South Gilbert. The Tuesday night that he does direct pointing here, I do a women's spiritual grow group at our home in Gilbert. You're very welcome to come.
Okay, because I live at the middle.
Oh, you do? So we just had the session last night, so it won't be the next Tuesday, but the one after. I'll have Shane give
There's some-
me your email address.
There's
and I'll
some
reach-
flyers right on by the door there.
I'll reach out to you.
Okay.
Your flyers are,
Right.
and for the people on YouTube watching this, I apologize.
Advertisement, sorry.
Yeah. So the invitation is to, really watch and see what is coming up for us in the area of these, the story behind the suffering. A lot of this is just biological, the suffering that we have. Like, there's a story of I heard a story of another teacher that was walking his dogs on leashes. He was out in the country and he picked up the dogs and put them on the other side, and he had the leashes and he straddled the barbed wire fence, and he's not living here, he's living in Australia. And the reason I say that is because there's two kangaroos started run by, and his dog saw him, and he he was not in a good position. You know, one leg and he had the dogs, and they were going to go after the kangaroos, and he had to yell at the dogs. You know, and he said it was a biological. He actually called it biological anger, but it was more like a instinct and intuition to save himself. It wasn't. I don't see that as anger. I see that as survival. You know,
Desperation
in that case.
in that moment.
Yeah,
Desperation.
and it's biological. It's just same kind of juices, same kind of reaction. And we can run into many of those each day, and that's what makes us human. And so, you know, the understanding, you know, from a spiritual standpoint of having peace of mind and resting in this presence doesn't mean that we are numb to the world. And actually, if we are excitable people, after we wake up, we'll still be excitable people. If we are introverted, after we wake up, we'll still be introverted. If we are, if we have bad habits, if we wake up, we'll still have those bad habits. But we won't be so drawn to some of these things as we might before, but they'll still be a part of our biology and a part of who we are. And I think more about this after we're done meditating. If you're new to meditation, just listen to the guiding that I do, and that'll help you. The instructions are built right in. I'll talk about the meditation object, which is the breath, and how we can use the breath in many different ways. The idea is to come into this presence, which is in a very easy way. Easy description is seemingly between the past and the future. So we're setting that aside. We're not worrying about the past and the future at all. If we can do that, we are going to have a wonderful meditation. Okay? So please make yourself comfortable if you haven't already. With the eyes closed, just bring yourself to your attention to the body. So we're taking a look at the body. Just ask yourself, what do you feel? What are you experiencing? There's likely pleasure and pain both involved. It might feel pleasurable to close the eyes and finally relax today. There might be muscular pain or tension, certain parts of the body, different ailments that we've been kind of working with. And for you people that have been meditating for a long time and do it consistently, you'll notice that the body is usually the first thing to go. And what I mean by that is that it's not a part of our awareness after a while. And that's one of the reasons that meditation can actually be a wonderful tool for recovery from pain and different ailments. And if a person feels as if the body isn't taking a back seat, so to speak, there's not a problem with that. The body is actually a very important part of our meditation. And usually what we do is narrow it it down, just like we do with the mind, with the thoughts. We kind of water everything down a little bit. And with the body, if we bring our attention to one area, the rest of the areas of the body do fall into the background. So if we bring our attention to the breath, for example, the breath is a wonderful meditation object. Wonderful point of reference, a wonderful point of concentration. And is very soothing. I think it's been used for centuries, most likely, as a meditation object. I know the Buddha talked about it 2,600 years ago, and I'm sure it was used before his time as an object to relax the mind and still the body. And so how we use the breath really doesn't matter as long as we find a technique to stay with it. The sensation of the breath, the feel of it anywhere in the body, the movement, the coolness. If we visualize the breath in some way, or count the breath. And we can use the breath in conjunction with other types of meditation, such as scanning or sweeping, using the exhalation or even the inhalation as a point to breathe through certain areas of the body, maybe areas that have been causing pain or stiffness or tension. And so we want to relax the body. We want to sometimes systematically go through the body and relax the forehead and the cheeks and the back and the shoulders and the arms and legs, particularly any area that is causing problems for us. But I want everybody to try to consciously try to relax the tongue and see how this feels for you. And when I ask you to relax the tongue, notice if you're actually applying some tension or pressure to it before I mention that. And notice how it feels. If you relax the tongue, many people feel like they're relaxing the entire body. During our meditation retreats, they're silent retreats. The tongue doesn't have to be ready to be used for speaking. We try to eat mindfully. We try to relax the tongue and actually every part of the body as much as we can. And use our energy very mindfully, with as little effort as possible. And we can do the same when we're meditating. But it's proven that when we relax the tongue, it's one area of the body, that the brain waves slow down and we almost immediately show more alpha brain waves and even more into more theta brain waves just by relaxing that area. So this is a very crucial point for us, something that we most likely never consider relaxing. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because of our awareness. We place our awareness on something, it changes. And if we have the intention to relax something, we can definitely do that. And if we can relax the tongue and still focus on the breath, we're kind of broadening our meditation object. We're using almost the entire body because the breath is part of the body. And when we do that, we'll notice that we are very present. When we do these practices, these exercises. Completely related and actually a really important part of our meditation. We're not asking the mind to forget about the past or the future. It's just happening naturally by applying our concentration on the breath and being aware of relaxing a simple part of the body. In this case, the tongue. And so by relieving the thoughts of the past, we're relieving a lot of hidden anger and ill will, which is anger towards ourselves. And we're also releasing a great amount of fear by not going into the future. And we're relieving the need to be fixing and being prepared for this or that. And so this presence is very healing for us. There's no stress to be found there. There's no anxiety, no restlessness, no worry. The only time we find these things is when the mind has a tendency to move into the past or the future. And when we're meditating, we should make the intention to notice that and then come back to the breath. Come back to relaxation. And if the mind continually goes into the past or the future, we want to really ask ourselves, what is the story behind that? Why is that? And is it necessary? And ask ourselves if it's just a habit that we are unable to let go of for whatever reason. Maybe it's time to let go of that. May each one of us and all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to us. May no difficulties come to us. May we all have worldly and spiritual success. May we have the patience and the courage and the understanding to meet and overcome any problems or difficulties that we might face in life. I hope everyone had a nice meditation. I know I did. You know, since this is a meditation gathering, I usually talk to something that pertains to it or helps the practice in some way. But I think a lot of us practice because we are sometimes, we're looking for something. We're seeking, sometimes. Again, last night we spoke about seeking and how unsettling it is. It can be. Like if we lose our keys, for example, especially if we have to go someplace, we're pretty desperate. We're on edge. When we're looking for them until we find them. And then when we do find them, we're relieved and we jump in the car and go. But it's kind of like that when we're looking for answers in life too. We can't really. We have difficulty settling down, and so that seeking is not necessarily pleasurable. The Buddha was a wonderful example of that. He was a wonderful seeker, and that's his whole story: seeking, looking for answers. Well, not his whole story. I mean, then he did find the answers, through his practice. He woke up, became enlightened underneath the Bodhi tree, as the story goes, and then he started teaching, well into his 80s. And so before that, the story, and probably the more famous part of his story, is that he was born a prince, under the reign of his father, who was the king, and the idea is that he had all these luxuries and no reason to leave what his father had intended for him, which was to take over his property and his land and his what he owned, as a king. And it's funny. I was watching a documentary and they found what they believe might be the area, the grounds where the Buddha actually lived. There's some kind of area where you can see a wall, and they thought that might be it. And the funny thing is, they said that it's if it is a kingdom, it's not what we would imagine a kingdom to be like, where it's a big castle or anything. It actually isn't much bigger than a lot of the homes that we have here in the valley, but it was considered a kingdom. And we don't know if that's actually the true, whether that is actually the place or not. But the story goes that the Buddha had everything, and everything he wanted, no reason to leave. And then he ran into the sickness, old age, sickness, and birth, old age, sickness, and death, and how this can. He looked at this as suffering, that we are born into this world, and we get old, and we get sick, and then we die, and we do it again and again and again. And he's basically saying, what fun is that, And from the religious, if you want to call it a religious tradition, but he was born as a Hindu, and Hindus believe in rebirth. That there was a past life, and if you believe in a past life, you believe in a future life of some sort. And so he saw that cycle, and he thought that, well, there must be an end to that, somehow to end that cycle, so that we aren't born into these circumstances that we are in. And so basically that's what he was calling suffering. You know, I look at it as stress. You know, we have stress throughout our life, and that life isn't so bad for a lot of people. Some people it's really hard, but for a lot of people it's just kind of, you know, kind of in the flow, kind of not sometimes, you know. And but in trying to find the answers, the Buddha was seeking. He was looking, and he spent 8 years as an ascetic, and living in the forest with these, you know, not eating anything much to speak of. You know, one meal would be enough food to fit into the hollow of his tongue, and because they were under the impression that punishing the body was a way to, you know, have these realizations. And so at one point he was so skinny that he almost died. He was unrecognizable. And I remember by a story that when he sat in sand, his butt print looked like a camel print. You know, like when a camel steps on sand, that's because of the bones in his butt. And then he started gaining some strength back from, you know, going through these ascetic practices, and he started refining his meditation from just concentration into what is now vipassana, or mindfulness-based practice. So he combined this concentration with this jhana with sati, with the mindfulness, and that combination is what woke him up, so that he could have the understandings that he had in order to teach. And he taught from his insights, you know, that he gathered from his meditations. And he obviously did a good job, because he's more popular now than he ever was, you know. And so the tradition is carried on for, you know, 25, almost 2,600 years now. But the seeking is something that we all do, and in order to find answers, and the answers that we're looking for is how to be, for most of us, I think probably everybody here, is to how to be happy, you know, how to be continuously happy. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying before when we started the meditation, that we can't, you know, we're all told that we can't find our happiness out there, you know, in material things. And we can't find it in circumstances, we can't find it in situations. It has to come from within us, and it has to come from this, having this peace of mind, that which allows us to flow with life, not against it in any way. And so, like I said before, nothing out there has to change. It's just our attitude towards all of these experiences that we have. And the only way we can really do that is to understand that it's not really our doing. You know, we are a part of it, but all these situations are just causes and conditions coming together. For whatever reason, we are a part of it. You know, if we run into a rough situation, we have to realize that it's not just us, you know, that has to own up to it. In other words, we're not the creator of every situation that we have, or really any situation. We have to look at all the components that come together to make these experiences what they are. And in doing that, it can't help relieve some of the burden that we put on ourselves. And so if we feel that we are responsible for every situation in our life, We want to, I mean, we want to be responsible for certain things, of course. If we commit a crime, we want to somehow be responsible for that. Or if we do something that we're not very proud of, we want to remember that to such a degree that we are somewhat responsible, but not nearly as much as we think. We can back up, and any situation that we've had, we can look at how it came about. The circumstances that brought that about. If we say something to somebody, and this has probably happened to all of us, that we say something and they take it completely wrong. And all of a sudden they're upset at us, they're mad at us. And maybe we've turned that around like, why would they be mad at me? Now I'm mad at them. We just flip it around so that we're upset with them because they took what we said wrong. But when we back it up, what we said, first of all, was not what they thought we had said. And also, the reason we said it is because in that moment, we just felt like that was the words that we should use at that moment. And maybe there were words that we had used in the past and it worked, or words that we heard somebody else say and it was very functional, at the time. But if we take all this full responsibility for every action, we're actually looking at the ego. We're creating a really solid self that is doing these things. Actually, like we are completely separate from the world, and which is impossible because we are born into this world, not as an individual, but as a part of it. Even when we're in the womb, we are a part of all of the, every piece of the world is within each individual, within our mother and within us if we're in the womb. And then we come out and all of a sudden we're a part of this world. Everything in it is a part of our development. The first words we hear, the first siren that we hear, everything is a part of our growth, Some of us, each one of us has had completely different experiences than somebody else. And so there is a true oneness. And the more individual we feel, the harder it can be for us. Because that's the, we can describe that as the ego, like I said before, or it's in Buddhism they call it selfing, or the creation of a self that is really taking the blame for everything. So the softer we get as far as this identification, the solid identification as an individual being, the easier it is to go with the flow of life, which is a part of us. We are actually nature. We're very much like a tree out in nature, that is a part of everything. We don't get mad at a tree and start hitting it, but we get mad at this, And we are nature just as much as a cat or a deer or a tree or anything else. And so there is that oneness, and it's like we are, like a person doesn't have an ego. The person creates the ego within the mind. And so there's this non-doership that when we feel, if we feel individual, we hurt. We get when somebody calls us a name, we take it personal. Oh, don't call me that. But when we look at what this body is, there's millions and millions of things happening with this in this body that is completely out of our control. If we could control this body, well, most of us would be like, I don't know, 29 or 30, you know, just we'd stay right there, you know, and, or, you know, we could pick our age. We wouldn't.
Maybe like 18.
18? Yeah, 18 was a bad year for
I know.
Yeah.
a lot of confusion.
Oh, you could be an athlete, no?
Yeah.
Not
Or
change.
we could age and not have any health problems.
Yeah, that would be ideal.
Yeah. But we age for a reason. I mean, this whole thing is for a reason, because if we didn't age and get sick and die, we would take everything for granted. We wouldn't learn the lessons. We would go through life in such a way that just imagine if we didn't go through this cycle, it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. And that's one of the big insights of the Buddha, that everything is impermanent, that everything, you know, is in a constant change. And, you know, so that aging, sickness, and death is not just us, it's everything. And again, depending on what our belief is, I could tell you all about my beliefs and what happens when we die and all that. Most of you have probably heard it before, but it's, you know, being a human, we are very fortunate because we can understand that we can do this seeking, and that this seeking can end. And when you meet somebody that's really feels like they're in this world and they're happy to be a part of it, they're in the flow of life, they are really done seeking for the most part, if you ask them. And they probably don't even realize it. You know, a lot of people don't realize that they were seeking or that they're done seeking. There's nothing wrong with seeking. There's nothing wrong with looking. And there's nothing wrong with trying to get the answers. And there's probably some of us that aren't here for that reason. Even. We're just here to meditate and be with like-minded people, which is wonderful. But to look for these answers and wanting to know these answers to such a degree that it causes pain. You know, my advice would be to of course keep on looking. You know, never give up, because the more settled we are with life, the more settled we are with death, and the easier death will be for us. And if we can go through life without being fearful of death, then we can really live. Then we're really living. Because we are present, you know, we are in that presence. As I talked about in the guiding part of the meditation, real briefly, is that fear we have is future-based. There's no fear in the present moment. There's no fear in the past either, because the past is, we get that figured out. We can be fearful of something that happened in the past might happen again in the future, but that's still future-based. So fear is something that we look at as the future, and the future hasn't happened. All that fear is just for nothing. Every bit of it. One of the presidents said, well, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
FDR?
FDR.
FDR?
Yeah. Churchill?
Winston Churchill.
Winston
That's
Churchill.
FDR.
That was FDR.
It's FDR.
FDR. And Winston Churchill said that too, probably. But FDR, yeah.
Google it.
Yeah, we'll Google. We'll Google. But false evidence that appears real, you know, is the fear that we're talking about. And that, you know, the end of seeking, in many respects, is the end of that fear too. But and the reason I say this is because we can get in a habit of seeking, even if we've been seeking all of our life, if we find what we're looking for, we might not even recognize it as the truth. And we just go, yeah, that's good, I like that, but I'm going to keep on seeking, I'm going to keep on looking. And sometimes it's so prevalent that we don't even know what we're looking for. We just keep looking and looking and looking. And the old saying of the person digging for the gold, and the guy that is looking for, heard that there's a gold buried in a backyard the size of this room, so he digs a little here, nothing, digs a little here, nothing, digs a little here, but he also heard that the gold is buried this deep, but he's too impatient. He's not digging far enough to find it. So he's digging all these little holes hoping to find it, but he's not going deep enough. And a lot of times that's true for our to get our answers we're looking for. I'm talking about the spiritual answers. And that is, again, the happiness, the not just little sips of happiness here and there, but not gulps of happiness either, but the continual happiness that is a part of our true nature. And again, if we have to ask, is that true? I mean, is it true that it's possible to have that? And the only thing that we can do is ask ourselves. And that's by asking ourselves when we're suffering, why? Why am I suffering like this? What is the deal? And we'll find that there is our story behind it. And that story always involves the separate self, that we feel as if this thing is individual from everything else and it's getting beat up somehow or getting mistreated or something's unfair. And once we crack that, then everything shifts for us. But don't believe everything I'm saying. You have to test it all out for yourselves. And that's why I'm giving you little tools like put your hand on your heart and ask yourself, what is going on here? What is this suffering? What is this stress? Why am I stressed out? I have a tendency to prefer to call it stress. It just rolls off the tongue better rather than suffering. But anything that anybody would like to add? I kind of got a little bit winded there. Any questions or anything? Maybe nobody's suffering, so that's great. That's wonderful.
What is the answer to suffering, like physical suffering, and like disease, sickness, and is there anything, if you sick, is going to be any answer?
Yeah, that's great. I didn't hear every word you said, but I think.
Is there any answer if you sick? You want to know why you suffer, like physically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're sick and you go inside, you go figure it out.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Is there anything?
It's kind of like going beyond the body.
Yeah.
Going within the heart. Beyond the heart.
Okay.
Even deeper. What's really inside? What is deep inside?
Like maybe something happened in real life, like pre-existence.
The previous life, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
What was it?
I don't know, I'm not 100% sure that, she might be saying that you're suffering in this life because it's something that happened in a previous life.
Oh.
Could be.
Yeah, it could be a part of a lesson, something that we have to learn. Yeah. Something, yeah, for whatever reason, some of these things follow, you know, if we believe in past lives. I